So, next lecture on mechanisms of evolution. Hopefully you enjoy it. So, what are some of the things that really drive evolution? Genetic equilibrium occurs when genes in a population stay the same. So ultimately, we're inheriting these traits. Some traits win out over others. But sometimes genes, genetic equilibrium, things are staying the same. Evolution occurs when those genes, they change. Like maybe you have more of one gene than another. And how do those populations change? Well, remember, populations evolve, not individuals. So evolution can take place when populations are subject to genetic mutations. Then those genetic mutations get passed on. Also, there's gene flow, genetic drift, non-random mating, or natural selection. Those are things that help drive evolution. So like in the case of mutations, you have different types of mutations. You can have substitution. There's also frame shift mutation, but it's like because in your DNA there's something that happens where maybe the DNA doesn't replicate itself properly, which in turn messes up how RNA looks, which in turn makes the wrong amino acid. Those mutations occur by chance, or sometimes the environment, as we talked with our cell reproduction unit, like some cancers, are caused by mutations in DNA. Gene flow, so you have genes going from one population to another. Migration is one of those things that affects gene flow. So because you have individuals migrating from one population to another, it'll affect the number of your genes, the gene frequencies. So in this case, you see you have a lot of the light-colored beetles, and then you have your dark ones. And before, they're all light-colored. These are all dark-colored, but you see emigrating individuals leaving this population to go to that one. And then you have the brown ones who are immigrating or entering this population. So it's going to alter your gene flow a bit. Genetic drift. So that's a change in allele frequencies due to a random event. Genetic drift is the strongest effect in small populations. So the case that's typically brought up here is the Florida panther. So in the Florida panther, like our population is so small. Granted, yes, it does have individuals that it's related to. Like it's related to the mountain lion, things like that, cougars. So that's why they've tried to rebuild the Florida panther population through like these breeding programs. But in terms of the actual just straight up Florida panther, because the population is so small, you have a lot of these lethal genetic conditions that happen, and that doesn't help our population of Florida panther now, does it? So, small population, great effect with the whole genetic drift. Then we have non-random mating. Like sometimes random mating would be like, okay, I'm out in the club, well, not me personally, but out in the club, and I'm randomly just gonna, random person, gonna mate. That's not how, especially not humans, but even certain birds, that's not how we mate. You actually look for a certain individual that has certain traits. And this typically, sexual selection is a really good example of non-random mating. So you're looking for certain traits that, or you have certain traits that increase your likelihood of reproducing. And that's why sexual selection, I can speak today, explains the development of traits that improve reproductive success, but may actually harm the individual. So this is the example of a Congo peacock where, beautiful bird, very beautiful bird. And because it's such a beautiful bird, well, you're going to get selected for it. And like, like there's certain species, they do have the mating rituals and all these mating dances, especially birds. But ultimately, then we have natural selection being really, really big driving force of evolution, where you have that ongoing process of, okay, hey, your traits are best for this environment. And you have stabilizing selection. So there's like the general in the middle, the nice, okay. Then you have disruptive selection, where it might lean to one way or the other. Then we have directional selection, where, okay, traits more so on this end are being selected than those on that end. And now we have speciation. So with speciation, how are species created? Well, okay, ultimately we have all these traits that are being selected for, and sometimes because certain traits are being selected for, you have species that are changing over time, and we get new species. So according to the biological species concept, like what is a species? It's a population of organisms that can successfully interbreed but cannot breed with other groups. So like humans, we can breed with humans. Dogs can breed with dogs. Cats with cats. Contrary to anything that you have heard on the internet or from a friend, that's the way it typically goes. So the actual speciation is the creation of a new species. And there's different ways that species are formed. One of them, mainly, is that isolation of populations. So like you can be isolated either geographically or reproductively. And there's actually another one. But with geographic isolation, that's like if you have a physical barrier between you and another population. So it's like if I'm living here, or like if I'm a cat species, I can't breed with a cat species that lives like on the other side of the river. Because, oh, hey, I can't cross that river. So you have some type of physical barrier. Also, like mountains are a really good example. Like the Florida panther. Florida panther is its own species, whereas like your mountain lion is a different species. Like I have these pictures here with like we're going with snails. So over here we have these individuals here, and then these individuals here. This is a larger population, but this is an isolated population. Over time, over several generations, this might become a new species. And this actually, geographic isolation, can lead to allopatric speciation, which allopatric meaning different homeland. So, creation of a new species because you live in different areas. And the example I gave is the desert pupfish and the Amargosa pupfish, which they look similar, but they live in different locations. Then we have reproductive isolation, where you have some species, some populations that used to interbreed, like now they no longer breed, and they can't produce fertile offspring, which also and this is why some people are kind of hesitant. I think it's the mule. They have donkeys and horses. They make mules. Mule is actually infertile. It can't make like offspring. But in the case of reproductive isolation, typically it results in disruptive selection. And with our reproductive isolation, we have prezygotic and postzygotic. So like, okay, reproductively, how can we end up making a new species? Well, prezygotic, it's something before fertilization. Postzygotic would be something after fertilization that affects the species. So like and then with reproductive isolation, you could have individuals who live in the same area, but because they reproduce at different times, like that's why they're considered two different species. So an example would be the wood frog and the leopard frog. Very similar, but because they have different times of breeding, that's called sympatric speciation. And then rates of speciation. So there's different modules of speciation, one being the gradual model, we call that gradualism, and saying that over time, small changes are made, so, but it's at a constant rate. So it's like, okay, here, then here, then here. Small changes, a relatively constant rate. Then you have punctuated equilibrium, where like quick bursts. You have quick bursts of change that happen, and then you have these long periods of stability. So like, let's say here you have rapid change in an isolated population. So remember snails from earlier? But random change, like, okay, now we have the larger shell. But then maybe that larger shell, you might outcompete the other population. And eventually all you have after time has gone by, we have this period of stability. Like now all you have are the large shell snails. And then under punctuated equilibrium, new species arise abruptly, but they differ greatly from their ancestors and then change little over long periods. It's like, okay, like bam, there's that change, and then we're going to maintain for a long period of time. And you can kind of also tell this from you have the layers of the earth where you have, okay, small shells, the ancestors, and all of a sudden stasis, like there is no change. Like stasis, rapid change, like bam, now we're going to change all of a sudden, then we're all large shell. And that's it for speciation and our lectures on classification and evolution. Hopefully you enjoyed all these flip lectures that we've been doing. We'll see how it goes. If you have any comments, feel free to leave one. Make sure they're appropriate. And I will see you guys in class. Have a wonderful day.